All right. So we are back recording podcasts again. Now, I have a bit of an intro before I introduce our guest. I am rebranding the show to be now called Chasing Common Ground Lifestyle Conversations with Chris Liddle. And for anybody who's been listening to the show since like October 2018, they will have previously known it as the Lifestyle Chase. And the reason that I have rebranded it is just basically to better describe what the conversations are about and broaden the guest repertoire of which I can connect to. But I won't waste too much time with that intro because I want to introduce our guest, Monica Gross. Did I say your last name
You
right?
did say my last name right. Gross and
Okay.
disgusting.
So how are you doing today?
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me on. And I love the rebrand as well, finding common ground. And that just sounds to me like connecting with people of all different backgrounds, I guess. And just, as you said, finding common ground, which is so important, I think, in today's society and finding connection and things like that. So, really happy to be here.
That's exactly it. I actually had like a one person conversation with ChatGPT for like 2 hours to actually come up with that. But you described the rationale of which led me to that name. So that's perfect. I'm glad that it came through. Most of my audience won't know who you are. So let's introduce who you are and some fun facts about you.
My name is Monica Gross. I am a comedian in Toronto. I'm also an accountant. I used to be full-time accountant and now I'm part-time accountant, part-time comedian, hoping to get to full-time comedian. So that's a bit of background on me. I also make videos and sketches on social media at Monica Gross 22. There's my plug. So I'm just trying to figure out my life path and what I love and what sets my soul on fire, I guess, which I have found to be comedy. So that's where I'm at. And yesterday, Zach Braff shared two of my videos. So that was the highlight of my career thus far. Thank you for all the well wishes from everybody who sent me well wishes on that. I'm very, very excited to be in the Scrubs reboot.
Well, I was watching your story and I saw how like fired up you got about that. And so I had it like written down. I was like, we're gonna definitely talk about the Zach Braff share.
Great. I'm
Um
glad that's a point that we're getting to. I'm glad that's a point of the podcast.
yeah, well, like what is it like to be just trying to like get some momentum and then you get a little win like that in a day? Like what was your genuine reaction?
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to understand if you're doing the right thing and if you're following the right path. And I think, especially with something like comedy, everyone is kind of on their own paths too, right? Because you have to think, do you want to go the route of just, trying to get into the top comedy clubs and tour, or do you want to go into the route of sketch or how much networking are you supposed to do? How much politics? How much sucking up? All of those things, which I think are also relevant to any career path. And so I was actually right before that in a state of thinking, am I doing the right thing? Should I be reaching out to more people? Should I be trying to get on more shows? Should I be going to more open mics? And I was getting lost in all of that. And then something like the Zach Braff thing happens where this huge celebrity just shares some of your posts and just gives you, some validation that they like something that you're doing. And I just thought to myself, I just have to stay true to myself and what I want to do and the path that I'm on without the constant questioning and comparing to everyone else. And so it was just kind of a nice feeling of, okay, I'm just going to keep doing what feels right to me and what's genuine to me because obviously that's working. But obviously, there's a lot of times where you don't get the external validation from that too. But those moments where you do, it's nice and it kind of pushes you to keep going on.
Well, I mean, I feel like 80% of the time you don't get that external validation and you just have to put in the work anyways. I think there's a lot of crossover between like the comedy space and the fitness space as far as like making a viable career out of it because a lot of people will try and try and try, and they won't hit their stride, and then they'll just give up. They'll go back to a more conventional career. But as I was preparing for this episode, I was kind of curious, like, what was life like for you as you were starting up your accounting career? Like, where was the transition where you decided, like, maybe I should try like a fun job instead?
Well, I guess I was in the point of, my late teens, early 20s where you have to pick something and go to university and do the same thing as everyone else because that's what's told to you. And they promise happiness if you do that, subtly. So I did it. I did all the stuff. I did all the things. I, became an accountant. I worked at a big company. I got another job for a lot of money, and I was like, "Wait, where's the happiness? I'm miserable," you know? And then in that process, I was actually asked when I was working at the large accounting firm to perform in a comedy show for charity. One of my friends that also worked there said, "You're funny, will you do this?" And I did it, and then after that, everyone said, "Oh, you should get into stand-up comedy, you're so funny." So then I did it one more time, and I did terribly, I bombed, and that was in 2018, and I was like, "I'm not gonna do this again." That was so awful, and then the pandemic hit, and then I was depressed, and then I thought, "What am I doing?" Like, what's the purpose here? What makes me happy? And I knew deep down it was comedy, and I knew I had to try that again. So that's when I started up again. But when I look back at my path, I mean, I don't regret it. I think doing the accounting career taught me a lot. It taught me a lot of what I like, what I don't like. It did give me some of the stability, and it gives me the stability now to be able to also pursue comedy as well. But yeah, I think the lesson to be learned is if there is something inside you, even if it's as crazy as going into stand-up comedy, it's something that I think in this life you have to explore because you only get one shot.
Yep. I mean, that's something that I almost preach constantly within like anybody that I talk to, any of the posts that I make is like, there's no sense in not trying the thing that you actually want to do because you're not really going to get another opportunity to try it. And like, even if we go the conventional path, like it takes like time to actually get to hit your stride, whether you choose like accounting or plumbing or electrician or like teacher or doctor, like it does take time. So applying like the same patience and stick to itiveness to whatever you choose would pay off. When you're preparing for your like material, is it all kind of like based on life experiences or is it stuff that you kind of draw on? Are you creating kind of a character? Like what's your process for that?
Yeah, it's definitely based on life experiences, and I think that's why I'm happy that I didn't just go into comedy right away as well, because going into accounting or trying to figure out other things has given me the life experience to be able to write about those things as well. And, sometimes I wish, like, I'm 29, and sometimes I think, oh, how much further I would have been if I started comedy at 22. But also at 22, I don't think I had enough to talk about, or I had been through enough, or I had really processed some of the things that I'm talking about now. And so I think that's also just another argument towards, of course, follow the things that you want, but uh, I also think it's kind of fate, right? Like when the time is right, when you're ready, things will happen. I did comedy twice in 2018 and then not again for 4 years. And maybe at that time I just wasn't ready. It just wasn't for me. And now is the time, right? So I kind of forget what your initial question was because I went on such a tangent, but I think I don't remember what your question was.
So essentially just trying to
Oh,
pull from where you
my material, that's what you
yeah.
right. Yeah, so I just pull on real life experience, I pull on what I'm going through. I mean, I'm 29, I'm thinking of freezing my eggs soon, and so, that's a topic that I've been writing on recently. Dating life, work life, just observational, just, what goes through my head. I find a lot of times if I'm on walks, I'll just be thinking, and then I'll just stop on the street and pull myself over and I'll just make a note in my notes app because I would have a thought for a premise or something like that. So I guess, yeah, pulling on life, and it's always how I've coped with life, humor. So it's really nice and beautiful to be able to use that as an expression and connect with others over it when I'm performing comedy.
Well, I think it's kind of important for just like life in general because nobody has like a perfect life. Like if we think somebody else does, we're making assumptions or we're only seeing the highlight reel.
Mhm.
One of my close friends and I, we often exchange memes back and forth, and it's mostly making fun of like my past like dating fails and stuff like that. But as I've like progressed in my career and stuff, I've been like, this is kind of it's funny. Like, what are you gonna do? Go back and change things? You can't. So you just make the most of it and learn from it. And if you can, monetize it. And so it's like if you're out there building a career based on like your ability to see the light side and like some probably frustrating and like character building moments, that's not a bad thing because it makes life a lot more sustainable because like silly things just keep coming. And I mean, I try to have like a bit of like a humorous lens through how I approach fitness, like talking to clients and teaching people stuff and trying to make the whole like workout in the gym less intimidating and less serious because like people like to laugh. And so that's kind of probably why your content showed up in my like explore page because I like to laugh and then your stuff popped up and I was go, oh, that's pretty funny. I'll
Yeah.
keep following. But when it comes to putting your stuff together, performing for a crowd, what kind of material have you put together that didn't really land the way you wanted it to? And what did you learn from that?
Yeah, it's a hard one. I find some of maybe my more specific or niche jokes sometimes don't land. Like sometimes some of the therapy ones won't land if they're a bit like if I'm trying to talk about anxious attachment and avoidant attachment, like just therapy terms that maybe not everyone knows. Sometimes if I try to get very personal, like talking about my family or, divorce or things like that, it can kind of make people pull back or be nervous, you know? They're scared to laugh if they think it's rude to laugh or there's a pity aspect of it. So it's a fine line because comedy is all about pressing on people's nerves, right? Like laughing is an involuntary response. I can't tell you to laugh and you laugh. It's pressing on one of your nerves. And so sometimes you press on the wrong nerve, right? And that's why people also get so upset over comedy and cancel comedians and things like that because it hit the wrong nerve. And so I think what it's taught me is just that in comedy, and as you were saying, if you can monetize it, that's where it also becomes difficult because comedy for me is such a beautiful, beautiful thing and a bonding and a connection and a coping mechanism and so personal to me. And the aspect of monetizing it can also be very difficult because once you start to try to monetize something, you're putting more focus on how do I sell tickets? How do I make this crowd happy? You're putting the focus outwards. So just balancing that and then knowing, okay, things may have bombed, things may not be working, but that's the process. And for me to remain authentic and do this the way that I want to do it, I have to stay vulnerable. And if that means bombing sometimes, then it is what it is. And I can adjust or I can try to do it in a different way, and it creates a challenge, which is also a good thing because I think to myself, "Okay, how do I make this funny?" and work towards that versus just giving up or trying to please the audience because the audience also knows when you're just trying to please them and make jokes for them. I mean, that's not what they came to see. They came to connect with someone based on their real life and their vulnerabilities. Or, if you are a comic who puts on an act, whatever it is, they're coming to connect with you. They're not, coming there and then me saying, "What do you guys want?" and waiting for a response. Like, no, that's also my responsibility to do that. So it's a balance.
I feel like it would be kind of like finding like your sense of flow, your flow state with kind of enjoying the material that you're going through because it's material that you genuinely are able to laugh at. It's not material that you think that other people are necessarily going to laugh at. It's just like this is your peak of humor speaking from experiences or stories that you've heard and stuff like that. It's kind of like most successful businesses are generally successful because they enjoy the process of what they do.
Mhm.
And then the success is the outcome of that. They're not necessarily successful because they're like, yeah, I need to hit this amount of revenue per year. It's oftentimes because they've kind of created like the structure and they are feeling fulfilled and they have a sense of purpose. But the day to day of having to perform in front of people has got to be kind of like exhausting sometimes. What's your daily routine? Like how do you stay at your best? Do you have some kind of like a ritual before you perform?
It's exhausting and I'm not good at it. Yeah, I wish I could tell you I do some kind of meditation and brain freaking thing, but it's hard. It's hard. It's hard to do something where it's such an adrenaline rush late at night. And then afterwards, if you do well, you're on a high. If you do poorly, you're on a low. Either way, it's difficult to calm down. I mean, the pros, what they'll do is they'll perform and afterwards they're mentally strong enough to turn it off, right? They perform. They say, okay, maybe I'll reflect on this tomorrow or for half an hour to see how I could have done better or what I did great and what I should keep doing. And then they shut it down and they go to bed. I'm still trying to get to that point because I'm still so into it. But I also know that if I want to be in this long term and for the longevity of it, I need to take on that mindset because I cannot function when I'm up until 3 a.m. just on my phone or still wired from the show. So that's I won't tell you how I do that because I don't do it well, but I will tell you that a goal of mine is to do that well, which would be performing and then compartmentalizing it perhaps in a way to think about it at another time or to think about it for a little bit and then go to bed, wake up the next day. What a lot of people say is you can think about a set until noon the next day, what you could have done better, what you did good, and then you move on. So that's kind of the goal. And then, of course, having the accounting role, which thankfully is part time and not very taxing, but yeah, I mean, balancing those 2 at times is difficult, but definitely my heart is with comedy, and I think that everybody knows that, so, of course, I do my job, but I definitely, a little bit distracted at times.
Well, I mean, like, I know what that's like. As I was kind of transitioning, I was in a warehouse space before I had transitioned into the fitness industry. And as it led up to that, like, flip the switch moment, I was definitely like more and more distant from the old career and like way more captivated with like the idea of the new career. And like, if I had waited any longer, it would probably have been forced upon me, like, get the hell out of here, go do what you want to do kind of thing.
Yeah.
But one thing that I wanted to point out, because you talked about how like the professionals do this and they don't have any trouble sleeping, they don't have any trouble shutting it down. And I was recently listening to a podcast with Matt Rife as the guest. And so like his everybody thinks that it's like an overnight success, but he was building it up over the last like 10 years and he did lots of shows as a kid and stuff like that. But he was talking about how he has like debilitating insomnia. Like he cannot fall asleep no matter what he does. And so I think that brings us back to like even the people that are maybe in a position where we may wish to be sometime, like they don't have it all out. We're just kind of like making it up as we go. And it's just kind of like about like making the most of each moment and sort of enjoying the journey and not trying your best not to compare it to other people. Cause like if I compare it to other people in my industries, like I wouldn't do anything. I'd be like, oh, this isn't enough. Like I'm never gonna be anyone. And I think that's important for everybody, no matter what journey that they're on. So you're based out of Toronto. I visited there last year. What is your favorite thing about the scene in Toronto? Like what are the things that stand out to you about that city?
The Toronto comedy scene specifically?
Toronto comedy scene, even just like the community feel or just like things about the city that stand out to you?
Yeah, I mean, I was born and raised in a Toronto suburb, so it's just always been home for me. All of my family and friends are there. There's been good times, there's been bad times, there's been in the middle times in Toronto, but it is home. And in terms of the Toronto comedy scene, it also feels like home now. I mean, I've been doing comedy for a little over a year, but I've made friendships that I know are going to last a lifetime. And I also think that's a function of doing something that I love and finally being in a space that I love. And I think that when you're in that position, you're naturally around people that feel the same and can feel that energy from you. And it just creates this bond because you already have something in common that is so special to you that it becomes easy to become part of this community, which is a really beautiful thing. And so for me, the Toronto comedy scene has become like family. And I have so many close friends there and so many people that I respect, so many people that I look up to. And it's been a really beautiful time and place for me. So that's probably the highlight of Toronto for me right now. But then, of course, there's also the aspect of, my family and friends that I've had forever that have supported me before this too. So, yeah, Toronto's home.
Sweet. Is that like the only place you've ever known as far as home goes? Have you moved around? Has that just been home base your whole life?
Yeah, I've traveled. I was in New Zealand and Australia for a few months before the pandemic hit, and then I had to come home because of the pandemic. And, I've traveled Europe for a few months, South America for a month. Yeah, I mean, none of them have been home. They've all been nice. I like doing longer travels and kind of settling into places and getting to know people. But yeah, for me, Toronto's always been home. I mean, I've always, thought of moving to the States or something, especially for comedy because there's such a ceiling in Canada. But, the whole visa process and citizen process is very difficult. But it's a goal, but then at the same time, my whole life is in Toronto. So I don't know. I guess the real goal would be to create a large enough fan base where I could tour in the States, get a visa and tour in the States and kind of get a name from all of those things to be able to work on projects that I would want to work on, like a Mindy Kaling, but at a, smaller scale or at the same scale, whatever, dream big.
Put a ceiling on
Yeah,
yourself.
whatever. I don't know why I do that, but I do that. But yeah, I guess that would kind of be the goal. And it's been nice recently, especially since Zach Braff posted. I've gotten messages saying, "Where do you perform? Are you coming to LA? Are you coming to New York? I'd love to see you." And that's really encouraging as well to know that maybe that could at one point be a tour, a path that I could do.
Well, I mean, one of my favorite things about podcasts is like you talk to a person at one point in their career and you see all this time go by, and then you get to be the one that can kind of circle back and be like, remember when we talked about that one thing when you're like, wouldn't it be nice to do this? And then you went and did it like 2 years later.
Mhm.
And like I've seen it enough people, like I've seen so many people say, well, like one day I want to do this, or this is my goal for the next 5 years. And then they went and did it. That like I just assume that it's going to happen when people are kind of like talking about their different upcoming goals and dreams and stuff. With regards to traveling, have you found that it has sort of reframed how you position yourself with comedy? Does it kind of give you like a broader outlook on things where it's like you frame a joke differently because of your travel experiences and because of the exposure to all the diverse different communities and stuff versus if you hadn't traveled?
That's an interesting question. I found recently a lot of my jokes have been Toronto focused and not ideal, especially because posting on social media, I'd like to hit the States mainly. I mean, that's the purpose to hit people in New York and LA. But in terms of traveling, I think it's taught me that the rest of the world is not like North America in terms of work-life balance. Before I started traveling, and I was an accountant and I was just raised in a certain way, I thought the rest of the world was like that. And then you go to Europe, you go to South America, you go to Australia, and it's, the live to work versus work to live mindset. And they don't care about their jobs, like it's not their life. And then it's very hard to come back to Toronto and try to settle back into this lifestyle. And you can say, oh, I've traveled and I'm worldly and I'm going to come back and I'm going to implement the changes in my life and not work in this way. But it's very hard when that's the entire culture and that's the entire, all of your friends and family are doing that. Like, what am I going to do? I'm going to go to work and I'm going to say, hey, I'm going to leave at 5 o'clock and I want 5 weeks vacation because that's what they do in Spain. They're going to be like, well, you're fired. I don't care. So it's easy to say, oh, this is not how people are living. I don't want to live this way. But then when home is somewhere like Toronto and everyone else is doing that, it can be very hard to put yourself back in that position. And yeah, when I came home from Australia and New Zealand, especially, and it was a strange time. COVID was starting. It was a time where I really thought, what what do I want to do? Because I had quit my job before I traveled to Australia and New Zealand, and I had given up my apartment. And I was like, I'm going to go to Australia with a one-way ticket, which is what I did. But then I had to come home. So I moved back in with my mom and I didn't have a job. And I thought, okay, well, what the heck am I going to do now? And it gave me the time to actually think about it. And there's also, of course, a stigma around being unemployed and not having income and things like that. And it was my mom who said, just relax. Like, no one cares. You're okay. It's good. Like, you're unemployed for, I don't know, a few months, a year. It's not gonna make such an impact in your life. Just figure it out. And it's crazy looking back for me to have even been freaking out about that. I mean, I worked at a huge accounting firm. I made money. I worked I did a lot of things, yet I was still freaking out that I was unemployed for a couple months. But that time away really gave me time to think, what do I actually want to do? I want to do part time accounting, even if I'm not making tons of money, even if I'm not moving up in my career because that's not something I care about. And I want to spend the rest of the time doing things that I love. And at the time, I didn't know what that was. And it's moved into comedy. And so, to answer your question about rephrasing jokes from traveling, sometimes, I mean, there's an element of that, but then there's also an element of staying true to yourself, right? Versus trying to please others. And I also think that Toronto is so multicultural and there's so many people of different backgrounds, especially in the comedy scene. I'm not in any sort of bubble in the comedy scene. I guess the comedy bubble, but there's people of all different backgrounds that I had to learn quickly to not just cater to my friends who would just laugh at everything I said or be relatable to everything I said. I think that a good comedian, well, there's two camps. There's the one camp of a good comedian can make anyone laugh in any room, but then there's the other camp of a good comedian can find their fan base and their people and make them laugh. So it just, again, it's the ambiguity of choosing what you want and how you want to do things.
That's solid. I mean, like, it's true. Canada just has so much diversity as it is that it's kind of like we almost get an opportunity to learn about a different culture just from like going shopping. And I think that's solid because it helps people to learn more about themselves and it helps people to have like a broader perspective on what life can be instead of thinking that we have to be a certain way because this is what everybody does. We get more exposure to how other people do things and we can kind of choose our own adventure based on that.
Yeah.
And I think,
Oh,
go ahead.
sorry. I was just gonna say, and those are my favorite shows where I'm doing shows in front of people that on the street we would have nothing in common. I would probably never they're friends, not because they're bad people, but just because there would never be an instance where we ran into each other and became friends. And then to do a show in front of such different people from me, but be able to bond over a laugh and be able to connect over humor. And then after the show, have them come up to me and say, "Hey, I love this joke. That was great. I connected to this." And to become connected to these people is just such a beautiful thing, to be able and get out of my circle and see people from different backgrounds, cultures, races, et cetera, and connect with them. It's been really amazing. That's one of my favorite parts for sure.
When it comes to connecting on a joke, is there a joke that somebody pointed out that they're, wow, like I really resonated with that one? Can you recall any of them?
I have, jokes on corporate life, accounting life that people connect with if they've been in an accounting job or a corporate job. It's about like wishing that, you would get hit by a car during your corporate job. Like not hard enough where you would die, but like where you could get some time off work, like paid kind of thing. That's the premise. And then I don't know, just, little lines here and there of course, dating jokes, sexual jokes that it's just a common theme, I guess. Like I have one joke and I say, I don't want to be on hormonal birth control, just a personal choice. But then I also don't want to wear condoms because I want men to like me. And it's like, that's like that gets a laugh from it's a general kind of concept. So things like that, where it's just like a nice common experience that a lot of people have.
I mean, some of your jokes land in ways that, like, I've never heard somebody deliver things in a certain way because I'm like, holy crap, like that hurt my feelings. So, like, let's dive into like crappy dating stories because this is something that I think is going to resound with a lot of people. And I have my fair share that I can draw from too, but it's your turn. So, like, if you could recall some of like your worst dating stories that are appropriate, that if my parents are listening to the show that they wouldn't be offended, what do you have to draw from?
Oh, parents trying to set me up. That's that's a rough one. That's a rough line to crawl because it's like at points I'm like, you know what, Monica, just try it out. Don't say no. Just be open. And every time I've been open to my parents trying to set me up, I completely regret it. No offense to this man or offense, I don't know, but my mom tried to set me up with this guy because she knew his mom and we were supposed to go on a walk and it was raining. And so I said, let's not go because it's raining. And so he told his mom that I canceled. And then his mom told my mom that I canceled. And then my mom told me. And I was like, are you kidding me right now? Like just just crazy things like that, and then to be fair, I did call him the wrong name on our date, like, not even close to the right name, but also, in my defense, he didn't have social media, and then I never saved his number in my and I get that it was bad, okay? I get it was not good, but it was right at the beginning of the date, so if you hate me because I called you the wrong name, just swallow it and then just never talk to me again. That's fine. I understand. But it was like throughout the date, he had to bring it up. He's like, "Oh, you called me the wrong name. You called me the wrong name." And I'm like, "I don't know what else. Like, I'm sorry. I don't know what else to do at this point." So it's I don't know stuff like that. And there's probably so many that I've blacked out in my memory. But that's the premise, I guess, of one of the.
Well, I mean, I feel like it's only fair if I share one of mine too.
Yes.
So here's one of mine. I think it was like 10 years ago. I was on a online dating date and I was out of ideas. I'd gone to so many different coffee places. I was tired of drinking coffee, but I wanted it to be a low pressure, low key first date. And so I picked up, I think it was like Oreo ice cream from the grocery store, and I met this girl at the park. And then we met up, we had our ice cream, things were good. And then I was like, this is kind of like a half ass date. And so I had this gift card for Earl's in my wallet. And so then we went to Earl's and I was so nervous because like we were ordering way more than what I was like thinking that we would order. So it was going to be a pretty expensive bill. And then at the end, she was like, yeah, I don't feel a connection with you. I don't feel like this is going anywhere. And it stung. And I packed that away. This was like, I was in my early 20s and I was like, whatever, move on to the next one. Well, plot twist, 10 years later, she finds me on the dating app again. And like, this is one of my dates that I don't have any connections with on social media. So I don't think she'll find my podcast. So I'm in the clear there. But she was like, I think that we went on a date like a million years ago. And then she was like, am I crazy? I'm like, I think you're crazy. And then I started like looking at her pictures and stuff and was like, wait a second. I recognize this girl. And she was like going by her like short form name, not her full name. And so that's kind of what tripped me up. But then as I started to like remember her, I started to get like this feeling of just like sadness and anger combined, like a grounded anger where it's like, I understand I'm not going to be everybody's cup of tea, but just like, why is she coming at me again?
I
Like,
hear ya.
she already said she didn't feel a connection. So in the time that has passed since, she had 2 kids. It didn't work out with the person that she had the kids with. And then she comes back to me to talk about like, do you think we have a connection and stuff? And we're diving into this. And she's like, don't you think you're like a little bit jaded? And like this was before she even knew anything about me or where I was at in my life. And I was like, I felt insulted by this because I was coming into this with an open mind and she had already rejected me once. And then as we're getting to know each other, I'm like, yeah, well, like, I mean, there's certain things that I want in my life. And it seems like you've already done a lot of the things in your life. And maybe some of these things won't line up. Like if a person's already had kids and I'm thinking, well, I want to have kids one day, but you're already done with that. Well, that kind of sucks for me. And so we're navigating all these conversations. And then I actually like had the best attitude about this and I was willing to go for coffee with her again for our 10-year reunion. And she ghosted me. She just and it's just like it's because that's sort of like that's what I notice in online dating. It's just like you meet people for the second time in a row
Yeah.
and it didn't work out because they maybe just didn't quite get it right the first time. And there's so many like the conversation starts and it's, hey, how's it going? You're like, good, you? And then that's the last you hear from them. So that's why it was so easy to share some of your posts in my story because I'm like, I
Really
relate to
bad.
this.
Yeah, we years later and ghost
Like I didn't even get to say like how my day was or
classic move. That's also, that's also gets to a point where you realize, people just want attention. They want the validation. They want to say, "Oh, you're still here? Oh, you still
man.
be with me? Okay, cool. I'm gonna put that in my back pocket for the next 10 years," you know? But then, yeah, I like to go at it from the other side with this kind of like dryness of like, so you said this, and now we're doing this. It's like, what are you? And just like the basics of it, right? Because we've all been through that. I think, we've all been definitely on one side, and I'm sure there's people who have been on both sides of that. So yeah, it's relatable, especially with the apps, even with just texting, even with just anyone who you have this connection with, but there's these unknowns that you don't want to say and that are socially unacceptable to express, but we're all thinking them. Things like that.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's life has taught me to just be a lot more like direct with my communication
Uh,
and just like take everything in stride. Like I joke about how I'm gonna like write a book about all of my chronicles of like the online dating and just like dating in general. Because I feel like I've gathered more stories than your average person, but I choose it to be like my way of relating to people. Like when people like, oh, I had the worst day, and I'm like, I'm ready for it. Like I'm pretty sure I can empathize with you. I got a lot of compassion in the bank here.
Yeah.
But yeah, like I think it's important for people to be able to laugh about the things that might be the things that like crush them during times of self doubt, to times of isolation, stuff like that. Like I know that everybody going through COVID probably learned something extremely humbling about
Yeah.
themselves. Like for myself, I saw a virtual counselor like 3 or 4 times and I just unpacked like 3 years worth of stuff. And it was so nice for them to listen to it and hear it and be like, wow, that's a lot. And just like that was valuable. And it's just when I work with people within the realm of like fitness and stuff, they're doing more than fitness. They got life stuff. They're getting dumped. They're meeting people for the first time. And it's like to give them that feeling of resilience where it's like they can make light of it. They can learn from the lessons and they can go with their best foot forward in the next interaction. Like I think that's important for people. And so that's like when I'm sharing stuff on Instagram, I'm sharing the funny stuff, the fitness stuff. I'm sharing like the kind of make light of tough situations because I'm hoping that people learn that that's sort of like one of the best ways that you can stay at your best. Do you have a second funny story by any chance?
Well, just to build off your point, that's life, and I don't regret any of the relationships or the dates or the hard times we've had because as you said, it helps you relate to others. I mean, hard times are so important. That's where so much of my comedy comes from, and that leads to connection and it leads to art, as corny as that sounds, but it leads to connection with others, empathy, compassion, all of these things that are so important to building deeper relationships. And to put yourself out there and to be vulnerable is so difficult, but it's so vital and it creates something so beautiful at the end of the day. And people who are scared to do that or think they're too cool or settle or things like that. I mean, I think eventually they get to a point where maybe they can relate to others, but to really just dive into life, it just creates even this conversation between me and you, being able to understand each other and where we're coming from and share these stories and laugh over them and cry over them and feel life over them. That's to me the whole purpose of it, and you can't have the light without the darkness, which I truly believe. And the downs are rough, but to find a coping mechanism, for you, I think it's fitness and the connection with your clients and connection with others in your podcast. For me, it's the comedy and, connection through that, just expressing ourselves. It's so beautiful and it's life, like it's life. So, yeah, to answer your question, another dating story. Oh, in the past couple of years, I haven't been dating as much just because comedy's been such a priority. I've been dating a little bit more now, and that's where some of the content is being derived from. And that's the content that people love because it is relatable. And I'm like, maybe I'll just go on dates just for the content, but no, then it's inauthentic, But another dating story. I went on a date with this guy and this was really stupid of me, but I was starting to try and balance my comedy life with my dating life because I was like, oh, I should date whatever. And so he asked me when I was free and I had shows that week, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. And I was like, well, I can't tell this guy I'm busy for the whole week. I'm trying to balance my life. So I said I'm free Saturday, but I would have to leave at 9:30 because I'm on a comedy show. Because I couldn't just say I have to leave at 9:30. Like, where am I going 9:30 on a Saturday, So I said
Yeah.
that, and he said, "Oh my god, that's so cool. You can say no, no problem, but do you mind if I come to the show?" And I was like, "Okay, how bad could it be?" Like how yeah, it was bad, but we went on the date and the hard part was that I was kind of into him. And so then I was in a dating nervous mode. I wasn't in like a time to perform comedy about my sex life and getting hit by a car in accounting mode. And so we went to the show and I did fine. Like I did okay. Someone came up to me after, they said, I'm a producer in Montreal. If you're ever in Montreal, here's my card. I did well enough to get that recognition. I got some laughs, but I didn't do as good as I like to do or as I usually do. So yeah, I was in a bit of a bad mood just because that's how I am after I don't do as well at a show that I want to do. And then the problem was we went for drinks beforehand and then we kind of had to rush to my comedy show and I didn't like my drink and I don't really like drinking before shows. So he downed his drink and my drink. Then we went to the comedy club and he bought another drink because that's the appropriate thing to do. And then he bought another drink at the end, but I was like, we have to leave because I already said bye. So he downed that one. So then he was like a little bit tipsy and he had driven to the place and I was like, well, you can't drive home. So do you just want to come to my house? Not to like, sorry if he's listening to this, but not to like do anything physical, but just because you're drunk and you can't drive. So he ended up sleeping on my couch and I had like no food in my fridge. I just had these like jubes because I had gone to a bachelorette and they like forced me to take home food. So I was like feeding him jubes and he was just sleeping on my couch. And then I was in my bed and I was so hungry. So I like went out to get an apple and I knew he was awake, but I didn't want to talk to him. So then I had to take the apple into my room and eat it in my room. And then he left at like 7 a.m. And my friends were like, how do you get yourself into these messes? And I was like, I don't know. Like, and I hadn't been dating because I was doing so much comedy. And the one date I go on, this guy ends up like passing out on my couch, eating my jubes. And I had to eat an apple in my room. Anyways, it was like a fine enough date, but I was like, it, I don't think so, you know? I don't know. Sorry.
The connection wasn't there.
Well, I don't know. That story went like way off the rails and was personal, but if you're listening, shout out, you know? I don't know.
That, that's funny. Well, I'll do my due diligence. I'll rally back with one of my own stories, and then we'll kind of bring the episode to a close. So my story took place probably about like, again, 8 to 10 years ago. I had met this girl on one of the apps and we decided we were going to go for coffee. And then if everything was going well, we would go to the art gallery because I decided I'd be fancy that day. So we meet up for coffee. We're having the coffee about halfway through. And then I get a text from one of my friends who had been crashing on my place that week. And he was like, I locked your key in your condo and I need to get in to get my key. And I'm like, oh my God. Yeah, I'm just like walking around outside. I'm cold. My keys are inside your place and I need to get into your place. So I basically had to chug the coffee and I wanted to make sure that this girl knew that I wasn't just trying to ditch her. So I was like, do you want to carpool together to let my friend out of my place so that we can continue our date? And she, yeah, yeah, sounds good. And so I was like, oh man, like this girl is such a good sport. Like I can't believe she's going with me for this. And then so we drive like the 10 minutes to my place. We let my friend into my place so that he can get his keys. And then she's going to the washroom and then he's outside and he's like, did you hear her laugh? And I was, what? And then she comes back out and she like he says something funny and then she laughs and she has one of those laughs. It's like an inhale. So it's like, oh my God. And that's like how she laughs at everything. He's like, I don't think I can get over them. I'm just gonna be like accepting. She can laugh how she wants. I'm just go on with this date. And so she's used my washroom, and this is a critical detail that I'll circle back to later because it's so we get in the car, we head to the art gallery. The art gallery is fun. We sit down at the benches, we check out the things. It's a good time. And then when we're driving back to drop her off, and I was like, what's like the craziest dating story that you have ever had, like in your online dating experience? And she's telling me about this guy that had dish soap in his bathroom. He didn't just have like normal like hand soap. And I was go, oh my God. Because what I did was with my hand soap like container, I took like some hand friendly like dish soap and I put it into like the fancy bathroom like dispenser because I was a total bachelor. Like she used dish soap at my house. And then so we go to drop her off and I was like, I had a good time. Thanks for like putting up with all the craziness where we had to let my friend out and all that stuff. And she was like, actually, this was just an experiment. She was like, I just wanted to test like what guys are like on dates. This is like research for me. I'm not actually like looking to meet anybody. What the hell? What? And then like
Oh,
what the car she
sweet.
goes freaking through. I'm like, I just wasted like my whole day on a girl that's doing like a research experiment. And it's like, ha, she washed her hands with dish soap. And that was that.
Sweet.
She's just playing guys just to, like, see how they react in situations, get some free stuff. Like, I paid for the coffee, paid for the art gallery. It wasn't, like, expensive, but it was just, like, kind of the the whole thing where you're just being like played like a puppet for the day.
That's not nice.
But
If like you have different intentions, you're obviously going in with the intention of trying to meet someone and form a connection. She's just like, don't care. Also, like, why would you like say that? Like, just ghost the person afterwards. Like, be, like,
yeah.
you know,
Well, I'm glad that you find frustration in it too,
yeah,
because at the moment I was like, "What the hell?
yeah.
Like, how can you possibly like protect yourself from this?" Where like people are just like doing research experiments. Like, there needs to be a disclaimer. All dates with me are research experiments, not just I'm actually looking to meet somebody or anything like that. But nonetheless, one of many stories that gets stored in the vault. I just felt like it was only fair that if I was asking you to share stories, I got to share stories too.
Honestly, we love a good vault. It teaches you. And all my friends are like, oh my God, Monica, what are your dating stories? Like, you're so fun. And I'm like, okay. But like it's kind of annoying when your relationship friends ask you that because I'm like, if you're so interested in dating stories, just dump your significant other and date yourself and leave me alone. But when my single friends ask me that, I'm like into it. But yeah, it's life, and it's fun and it's good for the bits. It's learning and it's learning what you like and what you don't like. It teaches you also so much about yourself, you know? What are you attracted to? Why are you attracted to those things? Why are you attracted to people who treat you a certain way? What do you want to be attracted to? What do you want? So it's all life lessons.
So, where do you see yourself in life like 5 years from now? If you had to like paint a picture based on like how life is going now and where you want to be in the future.
That's an interesting question. It's hard because I think for my whole life, it's been taught to me to have goals and to, monetize everything and to build things and to move up in life. But I think, I did that and I was actually having this discussion with someone yesterday. Like, I wouldn't say that the goal is happiness, but the goal is to do things that will derive happiness, do things that I love and focus on the things that I want to be focusing on and just move forward in my life in that way and to trust myself and to know that the path that I'm going on is going to be the right one for me because I trust myself enough to create that for myself and to also have compassion for myself because as you know, it can be very hard to do a path or to do something that is not the norm, that is not what everyone else is doing. And to just be compassionate in moments where I look at others and think, why can't I just be there in life? Because everyone's thinking that no matter what level you're at. If I'm at a much higher level in comedy, there are people who are at such higher levels and they're always trying to get more, which is, something that's good to strive towards. But at the same time, to just be happy with the process and to be happy where I am and what I've accomplished and compassion for myself and, obviously there's the aspect of personal life as well. I mean, I would like to find a partner and, as I said, is like I'm at an age where it makes sense for me to freeze my eggs and just to go along with that and that way and also not be hard on myself in that aspect. It can be very easy when you're dating to look and say, what's wrong with me? Am I anxious attached? Am I avoidant attached? Why am I attracted to this? Why isn't this working? Have I just been with crappy guys? But something that I've understood is that I think everyone feels that way until they find the right person, Like until you find the right person, yeah, of course, every person has been the wrong person for you. So just showing compassion with myself in that way too, and trying not to get too hard on myself, not settling in life and just taking it day by day. And then, also the goals of building this comedy thing that I love and just taking it day by day as well and, having these little wins, having viral videos and getting on shows and getting into comedy clubs and doing the thing. And yeah, that was a lot of words. I actually did want to mention I used to have a personal trainer and he was the best. I loved him. He was so passionate about what he did. He changed my life in so many ways. He got me thinking in, a different mindset in terms of my fitness and my health and he really made me a healthier person, not just physically, but mentally too, like, yeah, we would talk about things like diet and exercise, but he also brought in, the importance of stress management and sleep. And he got me to read a lot of really good books that changed my vision on health and just gave me a healthier self image. So I wanted to just say that, the fact that you're a personal trainer, I really relate to that because I had such a great personal trainer that I really connected with and changed my life. That was before COVID. And then COVID hit and I haven't really seen him since, but I've kind of taken my fitness into my own hands. But I should reach out to him because I hope he's doing well. And personal training can be such an intimate thing and connect you so well to people. And yeah, so I really respect what you do. Just on another note, throw that out there.
Thank you.
Yeah.
So, with that, we're going to end the episode. I'll get you to stay on the call so that we can have some closing conversation. But thank you so much for being on the show.
Yeah, thank you for having me. I hope my dating stories were fun because that's what I want them to be. I mean, yeah, some of them are lows, but creates my life and my story and my comedy. So I really enjoyed it. And I'm so glad that you relate to my material. And, I hope that everyone watching can check me out and relate to my material because that's what I'm trying to do. So this was great. Thank